You're now watching Because Geek.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Whistles.
How's your con going?
Awesome. Sounds like you're having fun.
Okay, well,
Oh,
Is there some sweet summer children in the audience? Okay. Hello, my sweet summer children.
So, yeah, what are we talking about here?
we are
Oh.
talking about how Game of Thrones changed TV forever. And I guess I'll start. I guess the most obvious way it did it, and I'm not sure if you guys think this is a trend or a real change, is have you guys seen the number of expensive, splashy fantasy shows coming out in the next 2 years?
Yep.
Okay, little list. We got The Witcher on Netflix, The Kingkiller Chronicle on Showtime, The Lord of the Rings show, $500 million. The Wheel of Time, we got Sandman, I'm pretty excited about that one. The prequel, obviously, Game of Thrones prequel, Watchmen, His Dark Materials, and it just goes on and on and on. There is just a gold rush now to see if they can replicate the Game of Thrones formula with another story. Although I guess my question for you guys is, do we think that is a sea change in TV, or is this more a situation of, more like vampires were super duper hot in the 90s and then it kind of faded? And this is, fantasy's gonna be hot for a while, and then it'll kind of, go down a bit.
Yeah, I would say
hang
for
on.
sure.
I'm going to hit pause.
What?
Dan, introduce yourself. Tell them who
Oh,
you're with.
right.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. My name's Dan Selcke, and I'm the editor at winteriscoming.net. And you are?
I'm Val from Because Geek, a YouTube channel where I do detective work on filming news for Game of Thrones. Hey.
I'm MJ from the YouTube channel GrayArea.
I'm Oz, co-owner of WatchersOnTheWall.com. Or sweet.
All right.
Okay, go ahead now.
Okay, so I was gonna say I do think that it's gonna fade. I mean I love fantasy. Don't get me wrong, absolutely adore fantasy. But I feel like it's always a different genre that is in style. You think?
Oh, totally, I do.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't fade. I kind of think it changed the game. Fantasy used to be kind of viewed as like the nerdy thing that no one really, it had a really niche group, but now it's expanded so much to so many people, and so many people love it and want to keep it alive. And so many people have been inspired by Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones to like write their own stories and try to mimic that. Yeah. But it's like, hopefully we get another perfect storm like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I do too. I do. You kind of, I think as humans, you naturally relate to like your experiences and your interests and those kind of things. One of the things with me was that I was not big into fantasy when Game of Thrones came out. And here's what drew me in. What drew me in was the storytelling and the characters and the locations and all of those things that were put together in the first, 1 or 2 episodes that were beautiful, and incredibly written, I thought, and well acted, and all of those things. It was not the dragons. If there had been dragons in the first episode, I don't know if I would have watched the show. But the way that it went, it was enough for me to go, yeah, I want to know what's happening in the story. And really the only thing, if I'm remembering correctly, the only thing you really see in the first episode that's kind of like, that's kind of weird, is the White Walkers at the very beginning. But for me, that was just enough to go, okay, I do want to know what the hell that is. And then, of course, when Jamie pushed Bran out the window, it was over. I was like, okay, I'm definitely watching this shit. So I wonder if I wonder how many of the Game of Thrones of the fandom and how big the show got, it will transfer over to these newer properties. Because some of them you talk about, and I go, okay, that sounds cool. And then there's some of them I go, man, I'm probably not going to have time to watch that. You know what I mean? So I guess it just really depends on the quality and how it's presented, and what it's trying to do.
I mean, of all these new shows, I think some are absolutely like destined to fail, because not everything can be a Game of Thrones size success. It just can't. Like, this was a very singular experience. It built up slowly over time, and and now it's going to be a crowded market. Like, I think we'll be very fortunate if one or two really catch on and carry the torch, but there's no way all of these things like become as big as this and have their own Sandman convention. I'd actually love that, but like down the line, we're all coming to that. Some will fail. I'm just hoping that if like one or two of them really catch, I think it'll be worth it, and it can kind of carry this forward. Because Hollywood, it's very reactive. What was big last, we're going to do now. So I think there is an inevitability to that, but it's going to be a really good time to be into this kind of story for a while now. They're going to take some big swings. I'm looking forward to the failures almost as much as the successes, because there's a lot of fun in that too, to watch and analyze and look at.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that we also have to remember how Game of Thrones lasted for about 10 years, and that fact is that so much has changed from the moment that it started until now, and how there's so many more, like, subscriptions, like Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, like, there's so much right now. And that has really changed the game for TV. And Game of Thrones started when, it didn't really have that much competition. So everything has so much more competition now. And yeah, so I agree with you that, many of them will fail, but at least hopefully one or two become a big thing.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think probably some of them will fail too, because with the Game of Thrones, it's just the perfect ingredient of everything. Like, you have fan involvement, like, so high. There's so much mystery, and there's so many things that even after the season ended that we still don't know or don't understand, that we're still like, we still love Game of Thrones. We still want to know these things. Are other shows going to be able to capture something like that, or have a story good enough to capture that? I don't know. It's like, it seems like a once in a lifetime kind of thing, but either way, it's changed the way we will look at TV shows from here on out. Like, to me, it's set the bar.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be tough, because you can't just expect. I mean, Game of Thrones. I always say this to people that I talk to about it, is that this show absolutely ruined me. Like, it really did. There's really nothing else on television that I turn on and go, oh yeah, this is good. I mean, I'm more judgmental now about the acting. I'm more judgmental now about the sets. I'm more judgmental about the sound. I'm more judgmental about the music. I mean, all those things that that now I look at so much more closely than I used to before this show came on. And that's probably a curse. It's probably a bad thing, because I may not get much enjoyment in my life now. But let's hope. But I think there's a very, very high bar. I mean, when you start with something that has been as successful as this has, well, everything is going to be measured by it, right? And that's not necessarily going to be a fair measurement, but that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, the first Lord of the Rings, the ratings were not near as good as the first, Game of Thrones, or maybe it was, or maybe it's, 10 times better, but then they fall, or something like that. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to watch, for sure.
For sure.
I mean, I agree with you that the bar is set very, very high. I do think it's good for viewers, because these networks are going to try to meet it. I mean, before, like, like, there's always been genre on TV, from like the X-Files to Buffy to Lost to kind of Game of Thrones is like the kind of culmination of, I think, like that line. And now people have to meet that standard. And one thing that goes into meeting that standard is another way that I think Game of Thrones has changed TV for a while: money. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, for a while now, TV's been better than movies. I'll just say it. And Game of Thrones had, sequences that were spectacularly expensive, and I think as good, really better than like the action scenes you see in movies. Battle of the Bastards, Loot Train Battle, come on, they're ridiculous. And now we're seeing with this new crop of shows, there's that kind of level of investment near the beginning. I mean, I'm not sure how much of you have all heard about Amazon's Lord of the Rings show set during the Second Age of Middle-earth that made huge headlines because they spent, I think, $500 million on the first, like, 2 seasons and, like, $1 billion for 5, which is stupid amounts of money. So that's exciting that they're going to put this money into it to try and equal that standard. They're going to try to get the best writers, the best actors, the best musicians, the best special effects people, obviously. I kind of going back to some of them will fail. I think there's a bit of a bubble because you can't put all that money in. You need a lot of return if you're going to put that much investment in, and they can't all make it. So my guess is, again, I'm kind of repeating myself, and we can move on after this, but that lots of money will go into this. A few will be successful, but some will be like big losses for networks, and that will kind of cool it off after this big next period we have over the next like 5 years.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, like, one thing that worries me, though, is that they seem to be focusing so much on the budget now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel like that's what made Game of Thrones all that big.
Yeah.
If, like, a budget, yeah, you can have a huge budget as long as you have a really, really good story to back it up, which is how all the fans, they were there because of the books to start with, not because of a budget. So, I mean, I just hope that they realize that how much the story matters and the writers and everything, and yeah.
Yeah, because arguably you could say season 1, the budget was probably really, really, really small, and in comparison to season 8. But you could arguably say that season 1 might be your favorite season, or might be what made you watch the show. So I definitely think the story itself is what makes a TV show important, like the story behind it and the writing. So I definitely agree with Val.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I'm basically regurgitating what y'all said because it's true.
Yeah.
I know, like, we seem to be like going down the line really neatly. We don't have to. Like, anybody else.
Oh, no,
topic,
it's okay.
just shout out. How about how Game of Thrones has changed the way journalists, bloggers cover TV? I know, like, all of us up here, I run a website dedicated to Game of Thrones. We're doing other stuff now, but I mean, like, it's my livelihood. Not really possible for a lot of people before this show. This show made it possible to have kind of a new crop of people just dedicated to talking about TV. How do you feel about that?
You want me to go?
No, go for it.
So for me, I have a YouTube channel, and I'm just gonna do last season as an example. So I have a full-time job as well, and I had to take every Monday off of work because I knew that I was gonna be a mess, and I had to like go over and see what happened. And if you don't have your video out by Monday, your my sweet summer children are like, right, what? WTF, because I don't want to cuss. Where is this video at? And I'm like, okay, I'm getting it out. So it's like, not only can you monetize your opinions, it's fun, and like you get to engage with so many people, and that ability to do that is a part of what grew the fandom, because people might have a question. Well, who is Joffrey's real dad? And then they look it up on YouTube or Reddit or Google or anywhere, and they get directed all these places, and they get all these ideas, and then conversations start to happen, and it's like just a huge fandom. And for me, I personally love the fact that I have a YouTube channel and can talk to all you guys and theorize and stuff, even though I was wrong a lot. But yeah, I love it. I love that we could do that. And I think that is a big part of the fandom, and I think that's really kind of a game changer when we're talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, Game of Thrones had a really good timing in that regard, because it was it became big at the same time as YouTube was blowing up as well. And so that helped it a lot, I believe, because I'm sure like fandoms as big as Game of Thrones before, they would share the same amount of excitement and, the geekdom and everything. but it wasn't as easily accessible, and there weren't as many people making putting their theories out there. So I feel like that also changed. That also became it helped a lot for Game of Thrones to grow, and as well the community. And I think the community was just a huge part of it, a huge part of Game of Thrones' success.
And
Yeah, for us at Watchers, I guess it's a little bit different because our business model was never really set up to be a big money maker or to be like this big profit thing where we were writing because we wanted to make money covering Game of Thrones. That was never the idea behind the reason that we started the website. We started the website because there were a lot of other, shall we say, hostile places on the internet where people are not nice and people don't feel like they're part of a community, and people don't feel like being themselves and saying what they'd like to say, and having afraid to share their opinion because somebody might come back and call them a dumbass or an idiot. That's kind of the reason that we created it. But all of us have full-time jobs. I mean, the website makes enough money essentially to get by, and it's really because the way we're set up. And we could have sold out, and we could have done a bunch of different things to make more money. I mean, it literally costs us, I can't tell you probably how many thousands of dollars it cost us to keep a certain level of integrity that we wanted it to have. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes I feel like it's better to do things for the right reasons rather than to do them just to, try to pad your pocketbook. And I know there's probably a businessman or a businesswoman sitting out in the crowd right now going, yeah, that guy is not smart. And I completely, listen, my wife's an accountant, so trust me, I completely understand. But having said that, we're okay to progress on, and whether that means covering the prequel or picking up some other things to cover. I know Dan and I know Wick, y'all have started like covering some other things.
Yeah, like all those shows going out.
Yeah, some other shows and some other stuff, and we may do the same thing if it's something that we all feel incredibly passionate about. But right now, we're just going to kind of hope that George puts out a book and keep talking about analyzing what we're doing, and then hopefully the prequel is successful. And we really won't know that probably until another year and a half or so.
Hopefully 2020. We'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. I feel like the way that a lot of like journalists and bloggers react to Game of Thrones, this kind of like after every episode you go in and you like analyze things, and like every episode spawns all these like new theories and new angles and new questions. You're right that there are plenty of sites that just do it for the love of the game, but there are other like major like news outlets like from like producers coming up to like to New York Times that are doing this and getting a lot of money off it. And this kind of explosion of traffic off breaking down every single thing, you see it applied to other TV too, like Stranger Things recently came out, and there's a lot of coverage of that in the media and just kind of breaking it down. So I feel like they're going to try to keep that going forward. I'm honestly not sure if it's going to be able to support the stuff that Game of Thrones supported, in part because you mentioned the streaming revolution affecting this earlier. I was at a panel the other day with about this kind of topic, and they were wondering whether there really can be the next Game of Thrones on a streaming service when it dumps all the episodes at once, and like there isn't the time to build the community, and there isn't the time to flesh out and wonder and about these questions that it raises. Do you think the next Game of Thrones, whatever the hell that means, is even possible in kind of a streaming environment where that kind of thing is more common?
I hadn't thought of that. That's a really, really good point. And that is along the lines of what I was thinking just now. It's just realizing what about Game of Thrones, because there's a lot of things about Game of Thrones that made it successful, but another thing is that there's two things I would say, and it's based on the books. The fact that there's so much lore and the world is so humongous, combined with the fact that there are so many mysteries in it. And George loves to put in so many random things here and there that you can create so many theories from. And I don't think there's so few authors that do this, first of all. And like, you could have an author that creates a huge world, but they don't add that many mysteries in it. You could have an author that loves mysteries, but the world is kind of small, you know? So I think that thing, the reason why it would be so hard to have another one like that would be that it takes so much time to write something like that, something that complicated as well. So yeah, and then with the streaming stuff, yeah, that definitely kills that as well. So I don't know what you guys think.
For Amazon Prime, is that considered a streaming service? That's a streaming service. But do they release all their episodes at one time? They do? The Expanse, I feel, is pretty successful and could potentially have the Game of Thrones.
Definitely has its cult following, yeah.
Yeah. And that's on a streaming service, but it was first released on Sci-Fi.
It was.
So that wasn't streaming. But yeah, when I get what you're saying. So when you get all the episodes at one time, there's nothing to say, well, who's his daddy? Because you know by the time you watched everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you don't, like, someone on Twitter already knows, and they're going to put out.
They're going to spoil it for you.
There's like less build, and there's just less opportunity to kind of get excited and then just kind of let it percolate among the community.
Yeah, the one thing that it does is it builds anticipation, and then it builds the water cooler talk Monday morning, and that's one of the things that builds shows. I mean, Game of Thrones blew up after the Red Wedding. I mean, it was already a hit show, but then after the Red Wedding, you got up Monday morning, and Good Morning America was covering what had just happened to Robb Stark, and 95% of America went, who the hell is Robb Stark? And then all of a sudden they start watching it, and then it blows up. If you look at the trends, it went season 3 to season 4 is astronomical. So I think we have to. Listen. Here's the thing. I'm kind of old school, and when you talk about the instant gratification issue that we have with the binging, and by the time there's excitement garnered for something, by the time you turn around and you experience it, it's over, right? This was something that carried us for almost 10 years, and for book readers longer than that. I mean, some of y'all have been reading the books for 20 something years now. So I don't know. It's a really, really tough call, but I think if it's going to happen, it's going to be on something that's a weekly series. It's going to be a Showtime or an HBO or a Cinemax or Stars or something along those lines, kind of like The Expanse started. Like it started on Sci-Fi, right? So, I mean, it's going to be something like that actually builds anticipation that people get excited about. Yeah, you can go to a Stranger Things con. No offense to those kids, they're all great.
Stranger Con.
But I mean, is it going to get the same type of fanatical con goers like us that will run for it again? I don't know. I don't think so, but it might.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yay.
Thank you.
I just wish Netflix would just really tangent quick, that they would just release them one at a time, like at a week. Why not? You have the power to do it. Okay, that's my thing.
Well, I mean, and seriously, what would stop them from doing that?
Nothing.
I mean, if it's
Their own
Sunday
stupidity,
night, appointment television, and it's going to be released at 8 o'clock on Netflix, on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, why wouldn't that work?
That's that's kind of my other point. So after the series is over, we heard a lot of think pieces about Game of Thrones is the last appointment television show ever. Is that true?
We as humans, we love nostalgia. Everything comes back around.
I think it's pretty right. Yeah.
Do we think it's the last appointment show?
Yeah, I saw a lot of think pieces about that after it was over. Like why Game of Thrones is the last appointment viewing show. The thing where people get together and have viewing parties to watch it every week, rather than just watch it where you can and do it whenever.
Okay.
That there's a long history of that. And this panel's about how Game of Thrones changed TV forever. Maybe if those pundits are right, maybe it didn't change it. Maybe this is the end of one phase of TV. We're going to move into something else that doesn't involve appointment viewing. Or are they just kind of, I don't know, writing stuff to think of the moment?
Look, as bad as I hate to say this, as long as The Bachelor's on, my wife's going to have appointment TV.
That's a good Is there a Bachelor Con?
Yes, Bachelorette.
Is there really?
Yeah.
Really?
Bachelor Island.
Oh. Okay,
Paradise
fine.
Island.
I learned something today.
A lot of naked people. which is not bad.
I feel like Blood Moon may have the potential. Sure. I feel like the potential is definitely there, especially with the way season 8 ended with so many more questions, especially about the White Walkers. And then, okay, well, we have all these questions about the White Walkers. Well, HBO wants to provide us with a series that's going to answer questions about the White Walkers. It's actually going to be really based on the White Walker. George said it should be called The Long Night. So,
And he is sticking to that.
yeah, he is sticking to it. And then there was something I heard the other day about maybe it being called The Longest Night.
That was also George.
That was George?
Oh yeah, I love how George R.R. Martin will not get on board with the name Blood Moon. I think it's really funny.
But hopefully Blood Moon will become appointment television.
Yeah, I'm up for that.
Oh yeah, because I mean HBO is still doing it that way, right?
Yeah, they're not streaming.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, so if it becomes something that people miss from things like Netflix or Amazon or all those who release all at once, then that's something that HBO could have, like as a +1.
Yeah, like that's like someone in its back pocket.
Yeah.
How do we feel about, I think another way that Game of Thrones changed the game in terms of at least coverage is this whole notion of spoiler culture, which, I mean, like, I've watched a lot of TV. I've watched TV for a long time. I mean, I was around for Lost and shows before that. I don't remember this fervent a hunt for clues and, like, people, like, going to the sets and snapping pictures of Maisie Williams in the water in season 6. I remember that. Like, and to the point where, like, on these shows, on Game of Thrones, they're having to, like, give them self-destructing scripts that they can't be read, or, like, pipe in their lines and, like, take these precautionary measures, like, insane. And then you see it in other shows, like Disney Plus is making The Mandalorian. They're making their Marvel shows, and they're being very intense about it. There are other shows that have totally picked that up. I definitely think Game of Thrones has created a culture among fans where they are determined to hunt for everything they can. And I mean, why not? It's fun, and it lets you talk, and people listen to you, and they watch, and it's fun. And then a kind of reaction among content producers to, we're going to lock this shit down, and we're not going to let anybody in by any means necessary. Is that a good thing? How's it going to develop in the future?
Listen, I think, not to just state the obvious, but, in 2011, there was limited social media. I mean, it was something, but it wasn't nearly what it is today. And so, yeah, I mean, how much of your show do you want to get out? How many secrets do you want to get out? I mean, one of the things that we did at Watchers was we did cover filming, and we covered casting, and we did cover spoilers. The spoilers that we covered were things that, some pictures from a set, or, the one that kind of blew us out of the water was Kit getting off a plane in Belfast after he had gotten killed in season 5. So, when he's getting off the plane in Belfast, well, that's a pretty good sign that he's still alive. So, how far do you go with it? The thing that we've always tried to do really, really carefully is to make sure that we absolutely label everything, this is a spoiler, and not give anything in the first picture that's on the front that will give it away, or anything in the headline. So there might be a hint as to what it might be, but it's never blatantly Kit Harington is in Belfast right now, even though he's supposed to be dead. But, I think it's something that all of them are going to have to take into consideration with any successful show. If it's a show that nobody knows anything about and they're shooting a couple of pilots other than Blood Moon, then, I think you're all right. Yeah. But, anything now that's going to be even remotely successful that has that fanatical base there that is interested in seeing it, there's always going to be who can post it first, and who can tweet it first, and who can get it out there first, and all that stuff. And that is literally the world we live in. And it ain't pretty. Parts of it are not pretty, but that's literally what it is now, and it's something they're really going to have to take into consideration when they do this. And it's not easy to do. And it may have contributed to D&D burning out a little bit, because, damn, they couldn't do anything without something being posted. And listen, if we didn't post it, somebody else was posting it. I mean, it was literally who was going to get it and throw it out there first, which is just the way of the world.
I remember just really fast, after season 5, all the reports were about, has Kit Harington cut his hair? And those played.
Hair watch.
Oh yeah.
Hair watch.
Hashtag hair watch.
I mean, like I would say that I hate the fact that they've increased the security measures because that's what I do.
Yeah.
You know, I want shit to leak. I'm sorry, that sounded weird. But at the same time, you still get enough information. Like stuff still gets leaked. The whole ending of Game of Thrones was out there for the longest time, somehow. It was just mixed in with a whole bunch of fake ones, but it was out there. And so I don't know. I like that culture. It's not for everyone, but it's definitely got its own niche community who absolutely loves to go into all of these little leaks and figure out what they mean. And I've realized that even for the new show The Witcher on Netflix, there's this one subreddit that's all dedicated to that same thing, and I'm going through it, and it's the same thing that we did for Game of Thrones. Like they're getting all these pictures from the sets and like taking pictures of.
No, I'm just agreeing with you.
Oh yeah, and getting the actors on costume and what are they filming? Is it going to be part of this? And because Witcher already has books that are out, so people are trying to figure out what part of the books they're filming. So I think that's really cool, and I don't know. I want it to continue.
Yeah, well, with Blood Moon, like, the hype that was with Game of Thrones is carrying over for Blood Moon spoilers. Everybody's like, what are they filming? Where are they filming? Who are the cast? Like, people are hyped.
Pictures.
Yeah, pictures. And I don't know which one.
And we're guilty. Yeah, we're guilty.
Which one of you got the actual logo?
It was, yeah.
Yeah,
it was
y'all
us.
had the actual logo, so yeah, y'all got spies on the inside.
Yeah, and listen, and look, and here's the thing. I don't want to ever seem like a hypocrite by any means. And Val and GrayArea, I love what you guys do. I really do. And I respect it. I respect the business of it and everything else. One of the things that we just tried to do was the speculation about pictures that we would get and things like that. Those things were kind of fun because it was trying to, put together a puzzle, even though we did not have, the complete, puzzle to put together. The leak thing, on the other hand, was like, when it's word for word, narrative and dialogue and, those kind of things, those are the things that we really tried to stay away from. Right. We knew they were there, but there was no way that we were going to feel comfortable putting them on a website, for whatever reason. And, it's just a difference. There's a fine line somewhere, and there's no right or wrong, right? There's nobody that's right or wrong with it. The thing that you have to do is if you don't want to be spoiled, you stay away from those things. I think the fair thing you do is you label it for the people and be fair with it and, just be careful and respectful of everybody who may not want to see those things yet. It's another issue with streaming as well, is, if you don't want to know what happened on Stranger Things yet because you haven't had a chance to watch it, you don't need to get on Twitter and type, hashtag Stranger Things, because you'll see it all before you watch it. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, just to clarify that, I absolutely hate the full-on leaked plots. That's no fun. I mean,
Not at all.
Like, you want to speculate on these little clues and little hints. It's not, you don't want to get the whole thing. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really the fun, and that's the enjoyment that I get out of what y'all do, and I think what we do as well, what Dan does.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, we did the same thing. Like, we knew the whole thing was out there. We're like, what's the point? It's no fun anymore if you post that. But I think the bigger point, just bringing it back to the panel, is that how it changed TV forever. I do think that's just a part of how people watch, read about, and make TV now. It's just that it's in there. The sports culture was in there. The safeguards are in there. The people who are investigating are in there. And it's just something that's here to stay for the foreseeable future. Personally, I'm into it. I think it's a lot of fun, but it goes to person. Another way Game of Thrones changed in a very, very literal way, kind of a TV, is, it turned Belfast, Northern Ireland, into a filming hub. Like, it really did. It put Belfast on the map. It created Game of Thrones. It employed a lot of people, but it created jobs that aren't even really related to, like, the production of Game of Thrones. It created jobs in Belfast to service all these new film crews that are coming in. And and earlier we discussed how there's going to be this huge influx of money, into these new fantasy shows. that's going to create like a new economy. Like I think that's a huge deal how Game of Thrones changed TV, that it upped what the kind of level of money you can put into it. That means a lot of people who maybe want to get into TV and want to get special effects, storytelling, are going to have a chance now because there's so much that people are making. So I think it's very important that it's going to give people jobs.
Yeah, I agree.
Any comment?
I'm sorry. I agree, yeah, about the money that they're putting into it and the job creation and everything that Game of Thrones did for Ireland. Even now that Game of Thrones is over, they still have the tours, the Game of Thrones tours. I was in the marketplace and I saw a business card for a Game of Thrones cruise to like King's Landing and Marine. I'm like, okay, I want to go. So like tourism, like Croatia tourism is up there. So it's affecting like all of those things. And yeah, the influx of money, like, I don't know, for me, for Game of Thrones, or for how it changed TV, is if I see a show and there's a dragon with 4 legs, I'm not watching that show. I'm not watching that show. If the dragon isn't anatomically correct, I'm not watching it. If the CGI isn't like that, I'm not watching it. If the art isn't like, it has to be like, it's like you said, it ruined TV for me. Because everything is going to be held up to Game of Thrones standards.
Well, that's interesting. Like, so are you saying that if there was like a really, really good show that featured 4-legged dragons and this like excellent special effects, production values, writers, directors, great story, new characters, would the 4-legged dragons be a deal breaker?
Yes.
Okay.
It would ruin it because it wouldn't be anatomically correct. Like that's why I like
fake animals.
That's why I like Game of Thrones. That's why I like Game of Thrones and the other show that I really like is The Expanse.
Yeah.
Is because they actually think about how things should be or would be. So it kind of doesn't feel like fantasy all the time. Like, yeah, dragons are very fantasy, but they don't necessarily scream fantasy because George has made them, oh, they shouldn't have 4 legs because that wouldn't be, no animal would have 4 legs and 2 wings because the wings are the arms. So I don't know. I don't want to go on a tangent here about anatomically correct dragons.
Do you, most of y'all know about the 4-legged dragons? Yes? Okay. No? Okay, all right, listen. All right, so here, all right. Listen, I'm not even the person to talk about this because disclaimer, Sue, who is my co-owner on WatchersOnTheWall.com, she has not let me read the books yet because she said I need a show viewer perspective only and you cannot read them until the show's over. So I'm looking forward to starting. Having said that, I saw an interview with George and he was actually hanging out with Sybil Kelly. He was hanging out with Shay. And he's got, all this stuff in his house or whatever. So she picks up this dragon and she says, is this one of your dragons? And he says, no, my dragons don't have 4 legs. My dragons only have 2 legs. And that's the only reason that I even know what you're talking about is because I saw that interview. But he was very adamant about it. He did say it's not anatomically correct. You don't have 4. That would be too heavy, number one, and they wouldn't be able to fly and some other stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of where that, I think that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah. So it's totally.
Yeah. Okay.
But there's an argument for that. Like, I thought those were wyverns, right?
Yeah.
Right? That's the other argument.
I don't know. I seen artwork in the marketplace. I said, "Oh, this dragon has 4 legs."
Let me tell you something. If you're completely bored with your life, do this. You can go to Google search and you can type in a Google search to search all the time and they will send you emails regarding those words. So just go put in Game of Thrones and save it as a search.
Oh, God.
And about every hour you will get about 20 emails of articles of Game of Thrones stuff. Somebody trying to get your clicks. So the one of them, like in between the off season between 7 and 8, was the argument between dragons and wyverns. And which ones were they? Because the ones in Game of Thrones are wyverns. And they're like, George is like, no, they're not. And it was this whole big thing that was really, really hilarious. Actually, don't do that, y'all. I'm about to turn it off.
No, I agree. Like, if an author wants, if George wants his wyverns to be called dragons, he can do that. That's his book, you know. So he can do it. You know, if whoever, what was her name, wants vampires to be sparkly, she can do that. You know, it's her book. So it's like we can't just say like, oh no, it's not supposed. You know, it's a huge argument of like how it's supposed to be and how the author made it, and yeah, it's yeah.
We have a few minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, or anything you want us to discuss, or any ideas you have about any of this? How it changed this game? How it could keep changing the game? The game changed forever.
Oh, yeah, I believe we have.
Yeah, there's a
microphone.
microphone right up here.
Microphone.
Okay, that's okay.
It's not really a question so much as a comment, but the whole streaming service thing and all the episodes being dumped at once, I mean, that's kind of the point of a streaming service. I mean, it's like HBO, yeah, they do these cinematic, like, essential movies as, like, TV slots, but, I mean, you go on, like, TNT or anything like that, and it's commercials every 15 minutes, and so that's why you have a streaming service, is you're not waiting for commercials, and then you're not having to wait every week, and it's, yeah, it would be nice, but it's like you kind of have to find that happy medium, because if they're only putting out one episode a week, then everyone's like, that's not why I'm here. Like, I'm here because I want to just sit here and binge it all for 12 hours straight, you know? And
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I am sure, I mean, I realize that I am not in charge of Netflix for good reason. Yeah, that there'd definitely be pushback. I think they could do it in a way that would make folk happy. Like, I'm not saying everything, like, a new show wouldn't be, you know, one episode at a time. I do think for something they know is popular and they know, like, why wouldn't, and again, I'm kind of thinking as like a person who covers this stuff, why wouldn't Netflix want to dominate the conversation for 8 straight weeks of like having an episode a week out and just having all this free advertising stuff? Probably because they actually like their customers and want to keep the binge people who happy, so that makes perfect sense. But in my pipe dream, they're at least once a week, and we'll see if I put that into the universe and it'll come back in a good way sometime.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't have a major problem with it. I mean, the convenience of it is good. I mean, it really is. If I feel like sitting down, if I can't sleep in the middle of the night and I want to watch an episode and I can get caught up or whatever else. Yeah, exactly. So, it's really based on our world. It's based on our culture and the fact that, different people work different times and have different, schedules and whatnot. So I'm not totally against it. It's just one of those things that I don't want to see it. I would rather not see it take over just because I do like the anticipation and the build up and those kind of things. But I also think it's about to change because Disney and NBC and CBS and all these other people are about to open their own streaming services. And so what that's going to look like when it all pans out, I don't know, but it's probably not going to look the same as it does right now. So no, I completely understand.
HBO Max. Can't forget that one.
Yes. What's next?
Yeah, thank you.
I am sorry, this is so off topic, but Because Geek, GrayArea, you're 2 of my favorite YouTubers. I have 3 favorites, but you're in my top 2. How did you come up with your screen names?
What?
Our channel names?
Your channel names, yeah.
That's a great question.
Well, for me, I think I was just trying to figure out something because my channel wasn't going to be all about Game of Thrones. So that's why I wasn't thinking of a Game of Thrones name. I was thinking of just something that was geeky because that's where I wanted to go. And then I thought of it as like someone asking me a question. It's like, so why is your channel name this? And I answered it with Because Geek. And that's how it became it, yeah.
Okay, MJ.
Mine is kind of the same. I knew I was going to talk about Game of Thrones, but I thought I was going to talk about other things that I never talked about. So I was like, okay, just gray area, because you could talk about anything in a gray area. It's like not defined.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan.
How you doing?
The whole topic about how it's changed television, to me it feels like the story, as you well know, Dan, story drives everything.
Yes.
And I think what Game of Thrones is going to do is it's going to force every programming on television to have a good story, or don't even bother.
Hey.
Nobody's going to watch it. And the other kind of weird, and I'm with you on the dragons. The dragons look so much awesomer when they're just two-legged. They look more powerful and all that stuff. But the other thing, I'm one of these crazy people who doesn't care if you have spoilers out there. I'm fucking gonna watch it anyway.
A lady with no name, everyone.
Yes.
Thanks a million for that.
Hey guys. So my question is for Game of Thrones changing everything, which it did. Now, what about cable TV? Because as we know, there are shows on cable TV right now that are basically Game of Thrones in a different period. We got Vikings, we had that Knights show that were kind of just like Game of Thrones, but they, on their own elements. And so, do you think Game of Thrones is going to change the level for cable TV? Because Vikings is pushing it on history right now. Like, they are going as far as they can without, being, what they can't do. But do you think that laws or things will change now because of Game of Thrones on cable TV?
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring up Vikings because of that same reason. Vikings does
same
an
show.
amazing show. I mean, yeah.
The same.
Yeah. And I don't know how big their budget is, but they make it look amazing, like the battle scenes and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely think it is. I think it already is. I think that, well, just like you pointed out, Vikings, Expanse for a while, Outlander, can't forget about that. Yeah.
Is that on cable? Is that on cable TV?
That's Stars, right?
I guess I was
Stars,
thinking like regular cable TV, but I don't know. I guess that is cable too, yeah.
I think, yeah, or if you want to rope in like all the zombie stuff over on AMC, which maybe we don't. But yeah, I think, and also, I mean, we got King Killer coming to Showtime. Everybody is getting this stuff ready. It's not just streaming services, not just HBO. Cable TV is definitely a part of it. I haven't really seen a network taking a stab at a giant, epic series like this. Oh, there was one that was based on the Bible. I think it was like on ABC a while back. I forget what it was called. Don't you remember? It lasted a season. Nobody watched it. But I mean, like, I guess networks can't really be a part of this because we didn't really talk about this, sex and violence.
Yeah. Exactly.
Is a big part of the Game of Thrones equation for, I mean, it's not why it's successful, but I mean, people are fascinated by the extremes of life, and cable and streaming have an advantage there that networks don't. But yeah, to answer your question, cable totally a part of this. It's going to be affected, and it's already changing.
Yeah, and I really think you're seeing the metamorphosis of it now because they're starting their own streaming services, and it's going to be a thing. Maybe possibly, but I completely think it's in the realm of possibilities that if for some reason you still watch The Walking Dead, just for example.
I never seen an episode.
Then it's not going to be on their cable channel anymore. It's going to be on their streaming service at 8 o'clock on Sunday nights, or they may drop the whole thing. And I also know that there are a lot of industries right now that are very, very concerned because they do not know how they're going to advertise their products once really everything becomes a pay service, a pay streaming service. So there's also a question about how much money would you pay for that a month? Because if you pay $15 for each channel that you have, it gets really expensive. So does that mean you keep 3 or 4 channels a month? I mean, I don't want to pay more than that. Yeah. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it transpires.
Sweet. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
We are out of time, but quick, the last question. Con gods, is that okay?
Yeah, we can get one more. I'll get in trouble. We can get one more.
Thank you, gods. So my question is, because you guys are talking a lot about shows building anticipation, do you think perhaps the final season of Game of Thrones and that works against it a little bit with all these expectations and all this time before the show aired?
Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up as well, actually. So thank you. Yeah, I definitely think that that's going to help shows focus on the writing, on the writing, but also on finishing things stronger than Game of Thrones for sure. And also, if they're going to work on books, they better be a finished series.
Yeah, well, with season 8, we had about a year and a half between the seasons. So we had all of that time to theorize these grandiose ideas, and so when you're theorizing, maybe you like your own idea better than what happened, or you like someone else's idea better than what happened. And I think that did kind of work against the show's ending, because some people felt let down, but I don't know. I don't think I would do it any different. I like the long break. I like the theorizing. Like that's my one of my favorite parts about it. And while I wasn't really happy with the ending, I still like the series as a whole is to me the best series on television ever, besides The Wire.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question.
All right, thanks for coming out, everybody.